Oh, this thing's covered in oil. Hey friends, it's Len here from 1A Auto. So you're getting ready to do an oil change on your vehicle. Overall, an oil change is a very basic maintenance item. By making even one mistake, it can affect the longevity of your engine itself. Now let's get into it. The first way that you can make a mistake is not knowing your engine's information or engine size. Commonly for this, you can either look up your VIN number online, or you can just lift the hood and you're going to find a sticker that tells you the engine size. Once you've done that, you're going to want to make sure that you have all the proper supplies. Go to 1AAuto.com, have them shipped fast and free directly to your door. Let's start by talking about oil. You want to make sure that you have the correct viscosity, the proper amount, and whether or not you should use synthetic oil. Some manufacturers recommend it, others don't. Switching back and forth is no help to the engine itself. Whenever you're doing an oil change, you also need to make sure that you replace the oil filter. The size and type of the filter do make a difference, so you need to make sure you get the right one. Some filters are considered a spin-on, others are canister filters. Just because it screws on doesn't necessarily mean that the inside is going to be the same. The wrong oil filter can cause running conditions or internal engine damage. Something that most people don't even think about is the drain plug gasket. Make sure you have at least one of them on hand. You may use it this time, or you might want it for the next time. Every time that you remove that drain plug, you can potentially cause some damage to the gasket itself. If it's made out of rubber, it could get dry and brittle. If it's made out of something else, it might get crushed down and not necessarily seal properly. It's a good habit to go ahead and periodically change that. You don't have to do it every oil change, but every other oil change is a good idea, especially if it looks like it's damaged in any way. Another extremely common mistake that people make is not having the proper safety attire or proper tools. Now you're going to be dealing with a chemical because that's what oil is. If you get it on your skin, you got to wash it off. If you get it in your eyes, that can cause some permanent damage. So you need to make sure you have hand protection and eye protection at all times. As far as tools, generally you just need to have some basic tools. A wrench, a torque wrench, an oil filter wrench. Aside from that, you want to make sure you have some rags and a nice collection receptacle so you can make sure you recycle that oil properly in the end. And another mistake people make is they don't pay attention to safety. Whenever you're doing something like this, you want to make sure you're in a safe area. If you're in a parking lot, you just never know if somebody's going to be moving a car or even walking by you while you're out there. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're on a nice flat surface, and if you have to, because the car's a little low, you could try to use some jack stands or even some ramps like this. But whatever it is you decide to do, if you only have the front of the vehicle up at one time, it's important to make sure that you put on your emergency brake and put some sort of chalk behind the rear wheels, so you're sure that there's no way that the vehicle can roll off on you while you're still under it. Now, if the ambient air temperature outside where you're planning on doing this oil change is cold, it might be a good idea to allow the vehicle to run for a little while to get up to normal operating temperature. As you're doing this, the engine oil itself is going to start thinning out a little bit, which of course will make it a little bit easier and faster to drain out in the long run. And obviously, the more used engine oil that you can get out of the engine when you're doing the oil change, the better. That way there you don't have to worry about old motor oil getting mixed with new motor oil. Now let's talk about oil filter replacement mistakes. It's a good idea to make sure that you replace the oil filter first. If there's a whole bunch of oil already inside the collection receptacle and you happen to take off the oil filter and it falls down in, it's going to make a big old mess. Another mistake that you could make, poke a hole. Get this thing to turn. Oh, that's making a mess. By poking a hole like this to remove the oil filter, there's the possibility you put metal fragments inside this oil filter. Or even worse than that, you're going to be replacing it, but if you happen to damage the engine where this screws onto, you're going to have some bad luck. The best way to remove an oil filter is with the proper oil filter wrench. Just carefully get right up on it and turn it counterclockwise to remove it. We'll let that oil drain out. Now this is a real common mistake. By not looking up here once you've removed the oil filter, if you were to leave some of the existing gasket on there, or forget to clean it down for some reason, you could have a possible issue with a leak, whether it's from double gasketing, leaving the gasket on there, or even just having miscellaneous debris. Besides, if you don't clean it down, you might not be able to tell if there's any type of damage up there. This one looks pretty good. Some people don't even think about this. You gotta prime that oil filter. By not priming it, it makes it so it's possible that the engine oil pump isn't sending oil up to the top of the engine during the initial start. Also, make sure you lube that gasket. You wanna make sure that you have a little bit of lubricant on there so it comes off nice and easy for the next service. The last thing we'll talk about as far as oil filter mistakes would be under-torquing or over-torquing the oil filter. Once it's bottomed out, typically just one more quarter turn or half turn is all you need, and this can be done by hand. You don't necessarily need it to stay on there forever, but you also don't want it to rattle off while you're driving down the road. Well, I guess we should talk about drain plug mistakes now. In this instance, you can tell I'm using something that's completely oversized. I'm over-torquing the drain plug. By doing this, I might cause some damage to the drain plug or even the oil pan. Drain plug, pretty cheap overall. The oil pan, a little bit more costly and a little bit more labor intense. That feels good. Another mistake that you could make is you under-torque the drain plug. As you can tell looking at this one right here, after I went ahead and tightened it down, it's still dripping out of here. If you were to leak all the oil out of your engine, it's gonna cause catastrophic damage and you're probably gonna need to buy yourself a new engine. Now let's move into talking about mistakes you can make when it comes time to filling the oil itself. Of course, you wanna make sure that you're using the proper viscosity oil. Typically for this, you can look right at the oil cap and it's gonna tell you what to use. If not, refer to the owner's manual. You also have to make sure that you use the proper amount of oil inside the engine. If your engine requires 4 3/4 quarts of oil, yeah, you might go ahead and make your way down and get yourself a 5-quart jug of oil. That doesn't mean that you put in the entire 5 quarts though. If you add too much oil to the engine, you can still cause engine damage. So just go ahead and take whatever's left of that jug and set it aside for the next oil change. You also want to make sure that you check the oil level while you're on a flat surface. If you're doing the oil change up on the ramps, your car is sitting at an angle, and so is your engine, in which case the oil level isn't going to be a true oil level. So assuming you're on a nice flat surface at this point, you'd want to go ahead and start up the engine. Let it run for a little while, and then turn it right off. After a few seconds, make your way over to that dipstick. Pull it out, wipe it off, and then put it back in and double check that oil level. Make sure you're in between those 2 dots, or in between the hatch lines. Anything below the hatch lines or that lower dot means you need to add a little bit. Anything above it means you need to make your way back underneath there and drain some out. You don't want to be low, and you definitely don't want to be too high. Another mistake is maybe when you're done all this, you don't reset the oil light or keep track of when you had done that oil change. It's important to make note of this, that way there you know when to do it again in the future. Most combustion engines are going to burn a little bit of oil in between oil changes. So it's important to make sure that you continuously check that oil level. If you need to add a little bit, go ahead and top it off, just up to that maximum line. Don't go anything above it. By running your engine low on oil, you can cause some serious damage internally to that engine. Now, I hope you liked the video. I hope you found it interesting. If there was something in this video that you thought you liked and you want to share it with somebody, go ahead and share it with them. It would mean everything to me. If you like the video or even love the video, go ahead and smash on the like button for me. It would mean the world. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe. Ring the bell. That way there you, all of your friends, can be kept up with all of our latest content. Thanks. Hey bud, how's it going? You doing a good job on that oil change today? Mic. My mic's not on. But whatever it is you decide to do, wait a minute, what was my line? A horse is of course. Unless that horse is a horse, of course. And if that horse is a horse, of course, the name is Mr. Ed.